Hello, my friends, before we dive in. Tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so we can see how far these stories travel. And don't forget to subscribe with notifications on, so YouTube keeps bringing you more chilling stories like these. I've always hated being home alone at night, though I'd never admit it to my friends. They'd laugh, call me paranoid, say I've watched too many horror movies. Maybe they're right, but fear doesn't need logic. It creeps in when the world gets quiet, when the streetlights throw long shadows, when the walls seem to breathe. That night was supposed to be simple. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, and I had the whole house to myself. No rules, no interruptions, just me, my laptop, and a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. I had music playing low in the background, enough to drown out the silence but not so loud that I wouldn't hear my phone buzz. It was around midnight when the storm started. The weather app hadn't predicted rain, but by 12:30, thunder was shaking the windows and rain was hammering the roof. The power flickered once but stayed on. I remember staring at the black TV screen, catching a distorted reflection of myself sitting on the couch, and suddenly feeling uneasy. I shook it off, just a storm, nothing more. By 2:30, I was ready for bed. I shut down my laptop, grabbed my phone, and turned off the lights downstairs. I made sure the doors were locked, front door, back door, even the sliding glass door in the kitchen. I'd gotten into the habit after hearing about a burglary in the neighborhood last year. Upstairs, my room felt like a safe zone. I crawled into bed, phone in hand, scrolled through messages, then set it aside. The storm was still raging, but the rhythm of the rain tapping the windows eventually lulled me towards sleep. Until the first knock. It was faint, almost drowned out by the storm. A soft tap 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 that made my eyes snap open. I sat up in bed, heart already quickening. At first, I thought maybe it was just branches brushing against the siding. I held my breath, listening. Then it came again, louder, more deliberate. Not on the walls, it was on the front door. I froze. Who the hell would be knocking at 3 in the morning during a thunderstorm? I glanced at my phone, 3:02 a.m. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. The knock came again, heavier this time, echoing through the empty house. I felt my throat go dry. For a moment, I told myself maybe it was a neighbor, maybe someone's car broke down, maybe someone needed help. That was the logical explanation, but logic doesn't stop fear from crawling up your spine. I got out of bed slowly, moving as quietly as I could, as if the person outside might somehow hear me. The floorboards creaked under my weight and I winced. From the top of the stairs, I could see the faint outline of the front door. The frosted glass window beside it glowed faintly from the porch light. And then I saw it. A shadow, tall still, standing directly in front of the door. My breath caught in my chest. Whoever it was, they weren't moving. They weren't saying anything. They were just standing there. I ducked back, pressing myself against the wall so they wouldn't see me through the glass. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the stranger could hear it. Another knock, this time slower, deliberate. I wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What would I even say? That someone knocked on my door. That wasn't a crime. And what if it really was a neighbor needing help? What if I overreacted and looked like an idiot? Still, something about the way the shadow stood there, so motionless, made every instinct scream at me to stay hidden. And then, just as I thought maybe they'd leave, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice, low, whispering, almost a growl. "I know you're in there." The words slid under the door like smoke. "I know you're in there." I felt every muscle in my body tense. My mouth went dry. My hands shook as I clutched my phone, but I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. The shadow outside leaned closer. I couldn't see a face, but I could feel the weight of its presence. "Open the door," the voice rasped. No, my instinct screamed, "Don't." I backed away slowly, my bare feet whispering against the carpet, careful not to make a sound. The stairs groaned under me as I retreated toward my room. I hated how loud the house suddenly seemed. Every creak, every sigh of the wood felt like I was betraying my own location. I shut my bedroom door softly and locked it, then pressed my back against it, heart hammering. My phone screen glowed in my hand, and I dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The line rang once, twice. But before the operator picked up, the knocking started again, louder, angrier. Bang, bang, bang. The house shook with each hit. "Let me in." My phone slipped in my sweaty hands and I almost dropped it. The operator's voice came through. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's someone at my front door. They're trying to get in. I'm home alone, please, you need to send someone." The dispatcher's tone immediately sharpened. "Okay, stay calm, what's your address?" I gave it to her, my voice cracking. "All right, officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Do not open the door, do you understand?" "Yes," I whispered. The banging suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. My ears strained, every second dragged. Then slowly I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving from the front door around the side of the house. "They're moving," I whispered. "They're going around." "Stay in your room," the operator instructed. "Lock the door. Police are on the way. Can you hide somewhere?" "Yes." My eyes darted to the closet. I bolted inside, shutting the door behind me, crouching low between a pile of shoes. My breath came in ragged bursts, and I clamped a hand over my mouth. From somewhere downstairs, a new sound made my stomach drop. The sliding glass door, the faint rattle of someone testing the lock. "They're trying the back door," I whispered into the phone. The operator's voice stayed calm, but I could hear the tension. "Stay hidden. Officers are close." The rattle turned into pounding. Bang, bang, glass shook in its frame. I imagined it shattering any second. And then silence again. I waited, heart hammering, ears ringing from the blood rushing through my head. Then came the sound that nearly made me scream. From directly below me. Floorboards inside the house. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, whispering so faintly I could barely hear myself. "They're inside. Oh my God, they're inside." "Stay hidden, don't move," the dispatcher urged. "Police are 2 minutes out." The footsteps were slow, heavy, deliberate, moving through the living room. Creak. The sound of drawers opening, cabinets slamming. Whoever it was wasn't just looking for me, they were searching for something. Then the footsteps started up the stairs. My entire body shook. I curled into myself, trying to make myself small, invisible, pressing my face into the clothes hanging around me. The phone pressed against my ear was the only thing keeping me sane. "Don't make a sound," the dispatcher whispered. The steps reached the top of the stairs. My bedroom door creaked. The lock rattled. Then came a low chuckle. "You can't hide forever," the voice drawled. The knob twisted, violently rattled. The door shuddered but held. Silence. Then footsteps coming closer, right outside my closet. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, forcing myself not to gasp, not to scream. The closet door handle twitched, just once, testing. I clenched my eyes shut. Please, please, please. Then sirens. Faint at first, then louder. Flashing red and blue lights spilled through the window. The footsteps retreated fast. A door slammed. I stayed frozen in the closet until I heard pounding at the front door, followed by loud voices. "Police! Anyone inside?" I stumbled out, legs barely holding me up, and rushed downstairs, flinging open the door to find 2 officers with flashlights drawn. They searched the house from top to bottom, every room, every closet. The back door lock was scratched, nearly pried open. Muddy boot prints trailed from the back deck into the living room, up the stairs, and stopped right outside my closet. But whoever it was, they were gone. The officers stayed with me until my parents arrived home the next morning, but they never caught him. No broken glass, no forced entry, just those muddy prints. And one more thing. On the inside of the front door, scrawled in what looked like charcoal, were the words, "Next time, don't hide." I grew up in a house that always felt just a little too big. Not mansion big, but the kind of old two-story place where the hallways seemed longer at night, and the doors didn't always shut all the way, and the air sometimes carried a smell you couldn't quite name. When my parents bought it, they said it was a fixer-upper. That was years ago. By the time I was 19, they still hadn't fixed much. The roof leaked when it rained too hard, the basement flooded once every couple of years, and the wallpaper in the upstairs hallway peeled no matter how many times we tried to paste it back. Still, it was home. The strange part is, I'd lived there nearly my whole life and thought I knew every corner, every draft, every creaky board. Until the summer my parents left for a 2-week trip, and I stayed behind to look after the place. That's when I found the door. It started with the wallpaper. I was walking down the upstairs hallway one night, headed to my room, when I noticed a section near the end that had curled up again. The strip hung loose, exposing old plaster beneath. Normally I would have ignored it, but something about the way it had peeled, so evenly, like a clean line, made me stop. I reached out, tugging at the loose edge. The wallpaper came off in one long strip, revealing not just plaster but wood, painted wood. A door frame. At first, I thought it was just an outline, like maybe the house had been renovated and the doorway sealed off years ago. But when I ran my fingers along the edges, I felt the faint grooves of a door, flush against the wall, even a knob-shaped bump under the paper. I froze, staring. I had lived here since I was 6. I knew this hallway. I knew it like the back of my hand. How had I never noticed this? The longer I looked, the more certain I became. It wasn't just a sealed door. It was a door someone had tried to hide. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, sunlight made the discovery feel less ominous, almost exciting. I grabbed a box cutter and carefully stripped more wallpaper away, revealing the full shape of the door. The wood was old, painted the same pale yellow as the rest of the trim. At the center was a rusted brass knob. I twisted it. Locked. Something about that made my stomach turn. Who locks a door, then wallpapers over it? I spent the next few days trying not to think about it, but the thought burrowed deep into my head. Every time I walked past, my eyes flicked toward the hidden door. I imagined what might be behind it, an old storage closet maybe, a crawl space. My dad had never mentioned it, and my mom certainly hadn't. By the 5th night, curiosity won. I went into the garage, found the old ring of keys my dad kept for forgotten locks, and brought it upstairs. The hallway felt different now, the air heavier. I tried one key after another, hands slick with sweat, until finally, click. The knob turned. The door groaned open. A wave of stale, cold air rushed out. It smelled like dust and something faintly sour. I coughed, holding my phone flashlight out in front of me. The room was small, square, maybe 10 by 10 feet. The walls were bare wood, darker than the rest of the house, and the floor was covered in a thin layer of dust that puffed up around my shoes. But what unsettled me most wasn't the room itself. It was the furniture. In the center sat a child's bed, metal frame, thin mattress, a small wooden desk against the wall, a chair. On the desk, a lamp that wasn't plugged in. Everything coated in dust, but arranged neatly, like whoever had been here last had simply walked out. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to step farther inside. My light swept across the walls and stopped. Carvings. The wood was covered in scratches, etched words and shapes. Some were childish stick figures and stars. Others were words written over and over. "Let me out. Let me out. Let me out." The phrase was scratched so many times it covered nearly an entire wall. My knees weakened. I backed toward the door, heart slamming in my chest. And then my phone flickered. The flashlight sputtered out, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled with the phone, smacking it against my palm, and when the light came back on, the bed was different. The sheets weren't dusty anymore. They were rumpled, like someone had just climbed out of them. I stumbled back, tripping over the chair, and bolted from the room, slamming the hidden door shut behind me. I didn't open it again. Not that night, not ever. But sometimes, when the house is quiet, I hear it. The knob turning. Soft knocks coming from inside the wall. And once, just once, I heard a voice, small, childlike, whispering through the wood. "You found me. Now don't forget me again." I don't scare easy. At least that's what I tell myself. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, learned to keep my head down, mind my business, and stay alert. Fear was something I thought I'd left behind with childhood. But that night, alone in the house during the blackout, I understood what it meant to feel truly hunted. It started around 9. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when the power cut out. No warning. 1 second the TV hummed in the background, the next everything died. Silence filled the room, thick and immediate. I got up and checked the window. The entire street was dark, street lamps gone, houses black. A power outage, nothing unusual. I lit a candle, set it on the coffee table, and tried to shake off the unease crawling up my spine. 15 minutes later, I noticed the first one. A light in the backyard, small, darting. At first I thought it was a flashlight, but the movement was wrong, too fast, too purposeful. It flickered across the grass, then vanished. I told myself it was my eyes adjusting, shadows playing tricks. Still, I pulled the curtains shut. An hour passed. My phone battery dipped to 20%. The house felt heavier without the usual hum of appliances. The candle had burned low, throwing the walls into strange shapes. I caught myself listening too hard, every creak amplified. That's when I saw the second one. This time from the kitchen window, a white glow moving between the trees at the edge of the yard, steady, deliberate, as if someone was packing back and forth. I held my breath, frozen, watching. Then it stopped, went out like it had never been there. I told myself it was a neighbor with a lantern, maybe checking on their property. I wanted to believe that, but the lights kept returning. One in the side yard, gone. Another near the fence, gone. Each closer than the last. My chest tightened with every appearance. I locked all the doors, double-checked the windows, then retreated upstairs with the candle. The air smelled of melted wax and sweat, and my nerves buzzed like static. I sat on my bed, staring out the upstairs window through a gap in the curtains. The street remained dark, silent. Then I saw them again. Not one light, several, moving together across the yard, weaving between trees, scattering like insects and then regrouping. Their glow was faint but unmistakable. They weren't random, they were circling the house. Panic swelled in me. I dialed my parents, but the call didn't connect. Service was down. I tried the police, same thing, no signal. My candle flickered, then guttered out, plunging me into blackness. I fumbled with the matches, struck another flame, and lit it again with shaking hands. The warmth calmed me for all of 2 seconds before something outside caught my eye. A glow right outside my window. I froze. The curtain shifted slightly, as though someone had brushed against it from outside. I leaned forward, candle trembling in my grip, and pulled the fabric back just an inch. No face, no figure, just the light, hovering, waiting. And then it blinked out. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't anything human. I retreated from the window, pressing myself against the wall, trying not to breathe too loud. Hours dragged by. The lights came and went, circling, closing in, retreating, as though deciding what to do with me. Around 4 in the morning, without warning, the power surged back. Lamps flickered to life, the fridge buzzed, the TV blared static before shutting itself off. And the lights outside disappeared. I stayed awake until dawn, heart hammering, waiting for them to return. They never did. But sometimes, even now, when the house grows too quiet at night, I catch faint glimmers through the curtains, always at the edge of the yard, always waiting. I don't open the door anymore when the power goes out. Because whatever those lights are, they only seem to come when the world is dark enough for me to notice them. I've never liked sleeping with my door closed. Something about it makes me feel trapped, like I won't hear the house if it decides to breathe too loud in the night. But when my parents left me home alone for the weekend, I closed it anyway. Not because I wanted to, but because the old hinges groan when they're open, and I didn't want to lie awake listening to the house complain all night. It was Friday. I'd finished my dinner, washed my plate, and settled upstairs in my room with a book. The house felt bigger without anyone else in it, as though the walls had stretched farther apart the moment the front door shut behind my parents. Around midnight, I turned off the lamp and slid under the covers. My phone screen glowed on the nightstand, a dim comfort in the dark. I let the silence wrap around me, telling myself it was just a house, just wood and plaster. At some point, I must have drifted toward sleep. And then I heard it. A noise, small, subtle, right outside my bedroom door. Not a creak, not the shifting of old wood. A sound too intentional, like the soft scrape of something brushing against the floor. I froze, ears straining. My room felt heavier in that moment, the darkness pressing down on me. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the pipes, maybe the old radiator. But when the sound came again, slower this time, I knew it wasn't the house. Something was moving. I sat up in bed, heart thudding in my chest. I turned my head toward the door, barely able to see its outline in the faint light sneaking through the curtains. The sound stopped. I waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. My body screamed at me to stay still, but my curiosity, my stupid, gnawing curiosity, pulled me out of bed. Bare feet on cold wood, each step measured. I reached the door. Slowly, carefully, I lowered myself until my eye aligned with the old brass keyhole. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. And then movement. A shadow shifted across the hallway floor. Not the kind a tree branch makes when headlights sweep by outside. This was thicker, heavier. It moved with purpose. I held my breath, staring. My eye burned from not blinking. And then I saw it. A face. Pale, expressionless, staring back at me through the keyhole. I stumbled back, heart exploding in my chest. My heel caught on the rug and I nearly fell. I clapped a hand over my mouth, choking down the scream that clawed its way up my throat. When I finally forced myself to look again, the keyhole was black, empty. But I knew what I'd seen. I didn't sleep that night. Not after seeing that face staring back at me through the keyhole. I sat in bed, the covers pulled up to my chin like I was 10 years old again, every muscle wound tight. I told myself over and over that I was imagining it, that my brain, already half asleep, had conjured something in the dark. But the image was burned into me, the pale cheek, the unmoving eye, the way it felt like it knew I was looking back. Hours crawled by. I must have nodded off sometime before dawn, because when the pale morning light spilled into my room, I woke up still sitting upright, the blanket twisted around me. The hallway looked ordinary in daylight. The door looked ordinary. For a moment, I wondered if maybe I'd dreamed it all, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house had changed, that it was aware of me in a way it hadn't been before. That night, I tried to convince myself everything was normal. I left the hallway light on before climbing into bed, a childish move I hadn't made in years. Still, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind outside made my chest tighten. Around 1 in the morning, I gave in. I crept toward the door again. I don't know why I did it. Maybe part of me hoped it would be empty this time, that the black circle of the keyhole would show nothing at all, and I could laugh at myself for being paranoid. I leaned down, pressed my eye against the cool brass. At first, nothing, just the faint glow of the hallway light. Relief started to creep in. Then, without warning, the light went out. Darkness filled the keyhole. My heart stopped. I knew I hadn't turned it off. And then I saw it again. The face, closer this time, so close I could make out the faint curve of lips, pale and still as though holding back a smile. I staggered back, breath sharp in my throat. The hallway light flickered back on a second later, glowing steady under the doorframe. I didn't look again. The next day I went through the house from top to bottom, checked every lock, every window. Nothing was broken, no signs of anyone getting in. But when I walked past the hallway, my stomach dropped. On the wood just below the doorknob were faint scratches, long, thin, curved, as though fingernails had dragged across the surface. I didn't tell my parents when they called to check in. What was I supposed to say? That I thought someone was staring at me through a keyhole that hadn't been used in decades. They'd just tell me I was tired, jumpy, imagining things. That night, I pushed a chair against the door. It made me feel a little safer, though I knew deep down it wouldn't stop anything determined enough to get in. I tried not to look through the keyhole again. I really did. But on the third night, curiosity gnawed through fear, dragging me back down to the floor. I pressed against the brass. The hallway light was on, empty. Relief. I almost laughed at myself until something shifted. Not in the hallway. Inside the keyhole. As though someone was leaning against the other side of the door, their eye aligned with mine, watching. I didn't see a full face this time, just the shimmer of movement, the unmistakable suggestion of an eye staring straight back. I jerked away so fast I smacked my head against the wall. From the other side of the door came a whisper, faint, thin, pressed close to the keyhole. "I see you." I didn't sleep at all after that. By morning, my nerves were shot. My hands trembled as I tried to pour cereal, and every sound made me flinch. I dragged the desk from my room and wedged it against the door. Spent the day packing, double-checking locks, whispering curses at myself for not leaving the house altogether. But the sun went down again. It always does. And when the silence of the house settled over me, I knew I couldn't resist. I crept back to the door, crouched low and looked. This time there was no face, no flickering lights, just black. I stared into that darkness, heart thundering, waiting for something to shift, for an eye to snap open, a grin to spread, but nothing moved. I almost turned away, until I realized the black wasn't empty. It was a pupil. Enormous, dilated, unblinking. I stumbled back, slamming into my dresser, the sound rattling the silence. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and the vibration jolted me hard enough that I nearly cried out. When I looked back, there was nothing, just the dim glow of the hallway light again. The police came the next morning. I hadn't wanted to call them, but when I checked the door again, the scratches were deeper, fresh. They dragged from the keyhole down toward the floor in jagged lines. The officers walked through the house, checked the locks, even searched the basement. They found nothing, no signs of a break-in. One of them, older, paused by my bedroom door and frowned at the keyhole. "Cover this," he said. "If someone's messing with you, this is how they're getting to you. Don't give them the chance." I nodded like I agreed, but that night, when the house was quiet again, I couldn't stop myself. I peeled back the tape I'd stuck over the hole, put my eye to it one last time. Nothing. Empty hallway. I laughed nervously, almost relieved, and started to back away. Then from the other side, a whisper, soft as breath. "Don't cover it again. I like watching you sleep." From then on, I slept with the light on, the chair against the door, the keyhole taped shut. But no matter what I do, some nights I wake up certain that someone is kneeling on the other side, their eye pressed against mine, waiting for me to look again. And the worst part, sometimes I can hear the faintest scrape of fingernails against the wood, not outside the door, inside my room. I've always loved having the house to myself. Most people get nervous when they're alone, but me, I used to relish it. No one telling me to turn down the TV, no one complaining about dishes in the sink, no interruptions, just silence and freedom. That was before the night I realized how terrifying silence can really be. It was a Saturday in late autumn. My parents had left earlier in the day for a wedding 2 towns over. They'd be staying overnight, which meant I had the house entirely to myself until Sunday afternoon. I was 17 at the time, old enough to handle it, or so I thought. The evening was calm. I microwaved leftover pasta, set myself up in the living room, and binge-watched shows until almost midnight. The house felt cozy, tucked away from the cold outside. When the credits rolled on another episode, I decided it was time to call it a night. I turned off the TV, clicked off the lamp, and headed upstairs. The house groaned under my footsteps, the way old houses do, and the darkness seemed heavier than usual, but I told myself it was just because I wasn't used to being completely alone at night. I brushed my teeth, scrolled through my phone in bed, and eventually drifted off. I woke up at 3:07 a.m. Not because of a sound, not because of a dream, just awake, eyes wide, heart pounding like my body knew something my brain didn't. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but then I heard it. A click. Subtle, metallic, and close. It came from downstairs. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. The sound didn't repeat, but the house suddenly felt alive, every creak and sigh amplified. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, the heating system maybe, or a draft moving something, but a chill crawled across my arms. I needed to be sure. I slipped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight I kept in my drawer, and tiptoed down the stairs. My heart thudded louder with each step, but the living room and kitchen were dark and quiet. I checked the locks on the front and back doors. Both were still bolted, windows shut tight. I almost laughed at myself for being so jumpy. I was about to head back upstairs when I noticed something strange. The key to the back door. We always left it hanging on a little hook next to the frame. My mom was obsessive about keeping it there, but now it wasn't on the hook. It was in the lock. Turned, like someone had locked the door from the inside. I froze, staring at it. I hadn't touched it all day. A whisper of movement drifted from the hallway behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam shaking, but nothing was there. The shadows were long and empty. Telling myself I was being ridiculous, I pulled the key out of the lock, hung it back on the hook, and hurried upstairs. I locked my bedroom door, something I never usually did, and crawled back under the covers. My heart eventually slowed, but sleep didn't come. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is waking up again, this time to a sound. Clicking. Same as before, but this time it was at my door. I sat up slowly, pulse hammering in my ears. The sound had been unmistakable, the metallic twist of a lock turning. But I was the only one home. I reached for my phone with shaking hands, meaning to call someone, anyone, but before I could, the doorknob rattled. Just once. Not hard, almost like whoever was on the other side was testing it. I clamped my hand over my mouth, forcing myself not to make a sound. My flashlight was on the nightstand, but I didn't dare reach for it. Minutes passed. The silence stretched until I thought I might scream just to break it. Finally, I got the courage to move. I slid out of bed, crossed the room as quietly as I could, and pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. I bent lower until I was level with the crack under the door. And that's when I saw it. A shadow. Not moving, not shifting, just standing there. Whoever it was had planted themselves right outside my room, waiting. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the chair. My phone slipped from my sweaty hand and clattered to the floor. I snatched it up and dialed 911, whispering into the receiver, "Someone's in my house." The operator's voice was calm, steady, telling me to stay on the line, to stay where I was, that officers were being dispatched. And then, while I whispered into the phone, something else happened. Click. The lock on my door turned again. I screamed into the phone, backing into the far corner of the room, my eyes locked on the knob. It jiggled once, twice, then stopped. The operator kept talking, her voice like a lifeline in the chaos. She told me to stay calm, that help was minutes away. But I wasn't calm. Because just then, I realized something terrifying. The door to my room didn't have a lock. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the entire house, top to bottom, every closet, every crawlspace. No one was there. But the scratches on my doorknob told a different story. Thin, fresh marks in the brass, as though someone had tried to fit a key that didn't belong. They didn't find fingerprints. They didn't find signs of forced entry. They didn't find anything. But I know what I heard. And I know what I saw. The sound of a lock turning, the shadow waiting outside my door. And the worst part, the thing that still keeps me awake every night. Someone was in my house. And they had a key. When I was younger, being home alone never bothered me. I liked the quiet. I liked the stillness. But after what happened that winter night, I don't think I'll ever be able to sit in a dark room again without glancing over my shoulder or my window. It started off like any ordinary evening. My parents were away visiting relatives 2 hours out of town, and I'd insisted on staying home because I had an important test to study for. I was 16, practically an adult, or so I thought. By 9 p.m., the neighborhood outside was already dead silent. We lived on the edge of town, with only a thin stretch of woods separating our backyard from the highway. Our nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down the road, the kind of isolation that feels peaceful by day and terrifying by night. I was sitting at the dining table with my books spread out, half studying, half scrolling on my phone. The only light came from the chandelier above me, casting a yellow glow across the room. Then I heard it. A faint tap. At first I didn't even notice. My brain shoved it into the category of house noises. But when it came again, slightly louder, slightly sharper, I froze. It had come from the glass sliding doors in the living room. I told myself it was a branch or maybe a bird, even though it was too late for either. Still, my curiosity won out. I got up and padded toward the doors, heart thumping harder than I wanted to admit. The curtains were drawn across the glass, but the faint outline of the porch light bled through. I reached for the fabric, hesitated, then yanked it aside in one motion. Nothing. The porch was empty, just the patio furniture and the darkness beyond. The woods stood quiet, like a black wall at the edge of the yard. I let out a shaky laugh at myself, but just as I started to pull the curtains shut again, I noticed something. A smudge, right at eye level on the glass. A greasy, oval-shaped mark, as though someone had pressed their face against it. I backed away slowly, my skin prickling. The rest of the night I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd accidentally leaned against the glass earlier. Maybe it had been there for days and I'd only just noticed. I tried to bury myself in studying, though every creak of the house pulled my attention back to the sliding doors. By midnight, exhaustion dragged me to bed. I left my desk lamp on, too uneasy to sleep in the dark. I don't know how long I was out before the sound woke me again. Tab, tab, tab. I bolted upright. It was deliberate this time, Not random, not the house. My room was on the second floor, facing the backyard. The curtains were half open and pale moonlight spilled across the carpet. I didn't want to look. God, I didn't. But slowly, stiffly, I turned my head toward the window. And that's when I saw it. A face, pale, wide-eyed, pressed against the glass. For one paralyzing second, my mind refused to believe it. I lived on the second floor. There was no balcony outside that window, no ledge big enough for someone to stand on. And yet, there it was. A man's face, expressionless, watching me. I screamed and scrambled back, knocking my lamp off the nightstand. The bulb shattered, plunging the room into shadows. By the time I found the courage to look again, the window was empty. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the corner clutching my phone, the police dispatcher on the other end assuring me an officer would swing by to check. When they finally did, at nearly 4 in the morning, they found nothing. No footprints in the frost on the grass below my window, no sign of anyone in the yard. But when I walked them to the sliding glass door, the smudge was gone, wiped clean. The officer told me it was probably just a prank, teenagers messing around maybe. He told me to keep the doors locked, left his card, and drove off. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a prank. The look on that face hadn't been playful, it had been hungry. For the next few nights, I slept with the curtains closed tight. I left lights on in every room. Nothing happened. The house stayed silent, and I started to think maybe it really had been my imagination. Until the 5th night. I woke again around 3 a.m., this time to silence. No tapping, no sound at all, but something felt off, like I wasn't alone. I reached for my phone, its glow the only comfort in the room, and that's when I saw it. On the screen, a reflection. Behind me in the dark corner of my room, a face, pale, wide-eyed, the same one I'd seen at the window. I spun around, but the corner was empty. When I looked back at my phone, the reflection was gone. That was years ago. My parents never believed me and I stopped talking about it. But sometimes, when I'm sitting in my apartment late at night, I'll catch myself staring at the window. And sometimes, when the glass fogs just slightly from the heater, I swear I can make out the faint oval smudge of a face pressed against it. Still waiting, still watching. I used to think nothing bad could happen in my own house. Home was where I felt safest. 4 familiar walls, a locked front door, neighbors only a short walk away. It was supposed to be a sanctuary. But that illusion shattered the winter. I started getting the calls. It began small, almost trivial, a little odd but not alarming. It was a Wednesday evening in early December. I was sitting on the couch in my pajamas, scrolling through my phone with the TV playing in the background when the landline rang. We still had one of those cordless phones, the kind my parents refused to give up even though everyone had cell phones. I was alone that week. My parents had flown out to visit my grandmother, and I'd insisted on staying home because of school exams. I reached for the handset, glanced at the caller ID. Unknown number. Normally, I would have let it ring, but for some reason, maybe boredom, maybe habit, I answered. Hello. Silence. Not the kind of silence where someone hangs up right away. This was lingering, like the person on the other end was still there, listening. Hello, I said again, sharper this time. Nothing. I rolled my eyes, muttered prank caller, and hung up. That should have been the end of it, but half an hour later the phone rang again, same unknown number. This time, I hesitated before picking up. Hello. Silence, but not completely silent. If I held my breath, I thought I could hear something faint in the background. Breathing, maybe, or static. It was hard to tell. My chest tightened. If this is a joke, it's not funny. Still nothing. I slammed the phone down, my pulse racing harder than I wanted to admit. For the rest of the night, the phone didn't ring again. I went to bed uneasy, but by morning I'd convinced myself it was just some dumb teenager playing around. Maybe they dialed random numbers for kicks. But the calls didn't stop. Over the next week, they came every night. Sometimes once, sometimes multiple times, always from unknown number. And always the same thing, silence on the other end with that faint suggestion of someone being there. I stopped answering after the fourth night, but even then, the phone would ring and ring until I unplugged it. That should have been the end of it, but then it followed me to my cell phone. The first time it happened, I was at school. Lunch period, sitting at the edge of the cafeteria, scrolling through my texts. My phone buzzed with a call. No caller ID. A chill ran through me. I answered anyway. Hello. Silence. This time I was sure. There was breathing, faint but steady. Someone was definitely on the other end. I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. Who is this? The line went dead. I told myself not to overreact, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being targeted. I started noticing little things at home, shadows shifting outside the window, the sound of gravel crunching on the driveway when no one was there, the motion light in the backyard flicking on for no reason. One night, after ignoring 3 calls in a row, I heard something new. The phone rang, and when I didn't answer, my voicemail picked up. I played it back later, hands shaking. There was nothing for the first few seconds. Then faint, almost swallowed by static, a whisper. You shouldn't be alone. I dropped the phone. My entire body went cold. At that point, I called my parents. I tried to sound casual, but I must have failed, because my mom immediately picked up on the fear in my voice. What do you mean someone's calling you? What are they saying? Nothing, just breathing, and once I swallowed hard. Once they said something. What did they say? That I shouldn't be alone. Silence on her end. Then she said, "Honey, you need to call the police tonight." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew she was right. I hung up, hands trembling, and dialed the non-emergency line. A patrol car showed up within 20 minutes. The officer who came was polite but skeptical. He listened to my story, took down the details, and said, "It's probably just a prank, but if it keeps happening, keep a log of the times and dates. If we can establish a pattern, we'll take it to the phone company." That didn't make me feel any better. After he left, I locked every door and window in the house, double-checked the alarm system, and tried to sleep. But sleep didn't come easy, because all I could think about was that voicemail. You shouldn't be alone. The calls kept coming, and they started getting bolder. One night around 2:30 a.m., the phone rang again. I woke up groggy and scared, fumbling for my cell on the nightstand. The screen glowed, no caller ID. I almost ignored it, but something inside me wanted answers. I swiped to accept. This time I didn't speak. I just held the phone to my ear and listened. At first silence, then breathing steady, calm. And then so soft I almost thought I imagined it. I can see you. My heart stopped. I sat bolt upright, eyes darting around my dark bedroom. Curtains drawn, closet closed, door shut. I whispered into the phone, my voice breaking. Where are you? The call disconnected. I didn't sleep at all that night. The night I heard, I can see you, changed everything. It was no longer just creepy silence, no longer something I could brush off as kids messing around. Whoever was calling me knew where I was, or wanted me to believe they did. The following day, I barely spoke at school. I jumped every time my phone buzzed with a notification. My friends noticed, but I brushed off their questions. What could I even say? Some anonymous freak keeps calling me and breathing into the phone. It sounded ridiculous. That evening, I came home, locked the door behind me, and sat in the living room with every light in the house blazing. The phone sat next to me on the couch like a ticking bomb. For a few blessed hours, nothing happened. I started to think maybe it was over. Maybe whoever it was had gotten bored and moved on. Then at 11:47 p.m. the landline rang. I stared at it paralyzed. The caller ID glowed unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again and again, 6, 7 times until I finally snapped, snatching up the receiver. "What do you want?" I screamed. For a few seconds, nothing. Then slow, deliberate breathing. I gritted my teeth. "I'm calling the police. They'll trace this number." And then for the second time I heard a whisper, clearer this time, no static. "Go ahead, I'll be gone before they get there." I dropped the phone like it burned me. I didn't sleep that night either. I curled up in the corner of my room with a baseball bat, the phone clutched in my hand, waiting for dawn. The calls came again the next night, and the next, sometimes 2 or 3 in a row, sometimes hours apart, always from unknown number, always breathing, sometimes whispering. And then came the night it escalated. It was just after midnight when my cell phone buzzed. No caller ID. My stomach turned, but I answered, unable to stop myself. "Breathing." I clenched the phone. "Leave me alone." Silence. And then the whisper, "Nice blue shirt." My blood ran cold. I was wearing a blue shirt at that exact moment. I dropped the phone and sprinted to the window, yanking the curtains back. Darkness. Just the empty yard, the woods beyond, nothing else. But I knew he was out there, somewhere in the shadows, watching. The next morning, I begged my parents to come home early. They thought I was exaggerating at first, until I played the voicemails for them. One was just breathing, another had the words, "Don't ignore me." They cut their trip short and came back that evening. My dad called the phone company to request a trace. My mom insisted I sleep in their room for the night. I thought maybe, just maybe, the presence of other people would stop the calls. But I was wrong. At 2:14 a.m., the landline rang again. My dad picked up before I could stop him. "Who the hell is this?" he barked into the receiver. I could hear it faintly, the breathing, the silence, then a click. My dad's face went pale. "Nobody," he muttered, hanging up. But I saw the way his hand shook. The police got involved again. They told us they were working with the phone company to trace the calls. But the thing about unknown numbers is that they're hard to pin down. Whoever this was knew how to cover their tracks. The calls kept coming, sometimes 2, 3, even 5 times a night. Sometimes when my parents answered, there was silence. Sometimes when I answered, I'd get a whisper. And each time, the whispers got more specific. "Don't lock the back door." "Why'd you close the curtains?" "Your hair looks nice down." That was the moment it sank in. This wasn't random. It wasn't a prank. Someone was watching me. 2 weeks in, my parents were exhausted. We all were. The police had increased patrols in our neighborhood, but they never caught anyone. Then one night, everything came to a head. It was a Friday. I was home alone again, just for a few hours while my parents ran errands. I told myself it would be fine. Nothing ever happened beyond the calls. At 7:38 p.m., the landline rang. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, fear, desperation, they pushed me to pick it up. "Hello," my voice cracked. This time there was no breathing, no silence. Just a whisper, "Look behind you." Every hair on my body stood on end. I turned slowly, phone shaking in my hand. The hallway behind me was empty. But then I noticed something. The back door, wide open. I dropped the phone, heart thundering, and ran upstairs, slamming my bedroom door shut and locking it. I dialed 911 on my cell, sobbing into the receiver. "Someone's in my house," I whispered. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, to stay quiet, that officers were on the way. And then my cell beeped, another call coming in. No caller ID. I ignored it. It beeped again and again, over and over until finally I answered, hands shaking. Breathing. Then you shouldn't have called them. Footsteps creaked in the hallway outside my room. I screamed and threw myself against the door, holding it shut. The dispatcher's voice was yelling through the other line, "Stay where you are. Officers are minutes away." The footsteps stopped. Then silence. For what felt like forever, I stood there, bracing the door, sobbing, until I heard sirens in the distance. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. But they found muddy footprints by the back door. The investigation revealed something even worse. Whoever had been calling me wasn't dialing random numbers. They were using a spoofing app, bouncing their calls through different lines to make them untraceable. And the footprints, they matched shoes stolen from a house just 3 blocks away. The police never caught him. To this day, I don't know who he was or why he chose me. But sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes with a call from no caller ID. And I swear, if I don't answer, the voicemail is always the same. Breathing. Steady, patient. Like he's still out there, waiting. I should have left the attic door alone. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. It was an ordinary Saturday, gray and drizzly outside. I was home alone, my parents out running errands, leaving me with nothing but the hum of the old furnace and the faint whistle of wind rattling against the windows. The house was quiet in that way that makes every creak and groan sound sinister. I had been cleaning the main floor when I realized how dusty the attic door was. It wasn't a door we ever used. In fact, I'm not sure anyone had been up there for decades. It was tucked in the hallway by the linen closet, old wood warped with age, a brass knob dulled by years of neglect. Something about it drew me in. I don't know if it was boredom, curiosity, or just the wrong kind of recklessness that comes when you're 17 and home alone. I knelt and ran my fingers over the knob. Cold, heavy, the kind of cold that feels almost like ice through your bones. I turned it. It didn't budge, locked. Of course it was locked. That only made me more curious. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Silence. The kind of silence that presses on your ears and makes your heartbeat echo in your skull. I considered leaving it alone, really. I did. But then I noticed something faint. A whisper, maybe, or the way the air seemed to move just behind the door. A subtle shift. Enough to make me pull my backpack closer, grab the flashlight I always kept in my desk drawer, and go hunting for a way in. I found an old hairpin in the kitchen drawer, bent it into a makeshift pick, and returned to the door. I knelt on the floor, fumbling. My hands were shaking. My pulse raced. The house felt alive in a way it never had before, as if it was waiting for me to make a mistake. After several minutes, there was a faint click. The knob turned. I froze. The door hadn't made a sound like that before. It felt like it was breathing beneath my hand. Slowly, I pushed it open. The attic smelled of dust, decay, and something else I couldn't place, metallic, almost like rusted blood. The beam of my flashlight fell on stairs leading upward, steep and narrow. Shadows clung to the corners. Cobwebs brushed my face. The air was thick, suffocating. I should have turned around then. I should have run, but I didn't. I climbed the steps, each one groaning under my weight. My flashlight beam danced across the wooden rafters, old trunks and forgotten boxes piled haphazardly. The farther I went, the heavier the air felt, like it was trying to push me back. Then I saw it. A door at the far end of the attic. Unlike the small, normal attic entrance, this one was different. Blackened wood, almost too old to touch, carved with strange symbols I couldn't read. The knob was tarnished, almost black, and the wood around it was scratched as if something, or someone, had tried to get in from the other side. I swallowed hard. My mind screamed at me to leave. Every horror movie I had ever seen told me not to open it. Every instinct in my body said turn around. But I couldn't. I turned the knob. The door swung open with a slow creak that seemed too loud in the small attic space. My flashlight fell on the room beyond, empty at first, but then I noticed the walls, the floor, the ceiling, symbols scratched into the wood, deep and deliberate, marks that looked like they had been made with fingernails. A chill ran down my spine. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft, distant, coming from the back of the room. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. Silence. I took a step inside. The floorboards moaned. My flashlight flickered. Then the whisper came again, closer this time. "Don't look." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I demanded, though my voice sounded weak, ridiculous even to my own ears. The air shifted, something moved, and then I saw it. A shadow impossible to define. Not human, but moving like it was. Crawling along the walls in the corner of my vision, always just out of reach of the flashlight's beam. It twisted and stretched unnaturally, limbs, or what looked like limbs, moving in ways no human body could. I stumbled back. The beam of my flashlight wavered. My heart pounded so loud it almost drowned out the faint whispering from the darkness. Then the whisper became words I could understand. "You shouldn't be here." I turned, desperate to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the walls. I was trapped. Panic consumed me. I threw myself at the door, yanking at the knob. Locked. No matter what I did, it wouldn't budge. My flashlight flickered again, and in that brief darkness I thought I saw faces, countless faces pressing against the walls, mouths opening in silent screams. The attic air grew colder. My breaths came in ragged gasps. The whispers became laughter, low and menacing, echoing around me. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying to make myself invisible. Time lost meaning. Minutes, hours, maybe seconds, merged into one long, suffocating eternity. And then silence. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, I didn't dare. Finally, I heard the latch click. The door creaked open. Daylight spilled into the attic. My parents' voices called from downstairs. I ran down the stairs without looking back, chest heaving. My mom rushed to me, confused and scared, asking what happened. I couldn't answer. Words failed me. I just shook, pointing vaguely toward the attic. When my dad went up to check, there was nothing. No symbols, no shadow, no traces of anyone or anything being there. Just dust, old trunks, and the cold, stale air of a forgotten attic. We locked the attic door that day, added a new deadbolt taped over the knob, left the lights on when we left the house. But even now, years later, sometimes when I walk past the hallway, I see the brass knob glint in the light and feel that same pull, that same weight in my chest. Sometimes in the dead of night, I hear whispers from above. And I know I'll never, ever go back to that attic. Because whatever is behind that door is something terrifying.